What's up? We are back. Another episode. Nothing's off the table. I have my good friend here today. His name is Mike Steinmetz. He's born in Danbury, Connecticut. He was a former professional actor who's now a successful entrepreneur, multi-businesses. We'll let him talk about that. But he's also overcome a ton of adversity. You'll hear it from him firsthand. I don't like to tell other people's stories. More importantly, he's an incredible human. He's an incredible friend, incredible husband or fiance? Husband. We love Joe. Yep. Shout out Joe. Big shouts out to Joe. Shout out Joe. And we've really connected over the last couple months. And when I told you about this, you were super geeked for me. And I was like, dude, your story's crazy. You need to come on, and you've overcome a lot, and we come from similar backgrounds. And, I think I got a couple episodes out now.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people that are like, wow, you have an incredible story and blah, blah, blah. And you've overcome so much. This is amazing. Congrats. Happy for you. And then there's also a lot of people that are like, oh, you're like some rich, entitled kid and like you, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, bro, addiction doesn't choose based on your net worth, your color, your creed, your origin, or anxiety or depression or any of those things. Don't choose people based on where they came from or what they have or anything like that. And so, it's a very interesting topic, but I would love to, let's just start with where you're from, what your upbringing was like, what mom and dad was like. And we'll just let it flow, bro. Let it rip.
Well, first off, thank you for having me here. Super proud of you. Like, this is awesome. And like you said, like there's no way to determine who's going to have what issues in their life, and issues happen in their life. And like for you, you're now devoting a lot of time and energy to putting out a positive message. And like, that's incredible. That's incredible. And getting people on here that have amazing stories and how they overcame the things in their life. And I don't know, man, kudos to you. Like, proud of you for at least from what I know that you've been through.
I appreciate that.
For me, let's see, where do we start? I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut. My father was a very successful veterinarian. So I grew up with a tremendous amount of dogs in my house. We had 35 dogs over the course of, not at once, but over the course of my life. My mom ran my dad's office. And in a lot of ways, like, yeah, I come from a well-off family. I saw your first episode, like, you didn't ask for anything, I'm sure. Like I was given what I wanted, and a lot of things in my life were like, get this on your SATs and I'm going to get you this car, which funny enough, like it was a great car and I did not get the score on the SATs. Took me 4 times. But my upbringing was bizarre. I was a really, really weird kid. I felt very different than other people. I didn't play sports, and I came from a small town. I actually grew up in a town called New Fairfield, Connecticut, like, couple hundred kids in the high school. And I was one of like 3 Jewish kids in the school. And I was not raised religious, but I just felt like an outsider. I was super artistic. All I wanted from a young age was to be an actor. When I was a little kid, I was obsessed with magic, like not Magic the Gathering, like magic tricks. I was just like very performative. And I also wanted to be the class clown. I wanted to be the loudest person in the room. And so there was always like weird conflict between me and my father, because I think my father was a scientific-minded businessman who didn't really know how to deal with the kid who was like sort of obsessive. And I was really obsessive from a young age. Like when I wanted things to happen, that's like how I lived my life. I was obsessed. And like, fast forward a little bit, like in middle school, I was like, I have to move to New York City. I have to go to LaGuardia High School to be an actor. And cause this huge scene that I couldn't go. But listen, in a lot of ways, like my childhood was pretty normal. It was just, I just always felt off. Coincidentally, at the same time, I had like major stomach problems growing up, like, health issues as well. And a lot of people didn't know about it, but I was just like riddled with anxiety all the time. And it was all covered up by trying to be like the loudest person in the room.
I can relate.
Fast forward a little bit from there, and I went to freshman year of high school and started getting like intensely made fun of for being Jewish. Like people would make fun of my last name, and it turned into this thing. And I'd go to the bathroom in the high school and people were hailing Hitler at me, and really my head up. And at the same time, I was like playing a lot of guitar, and I had a mohawk at the time, a 10-inch blue mohawk. And I was like a punk kid, and I was just really artsy. It didn't feel like I fit in, and, you know, was skipping school a lot and just doing like the typical, like I didn't give a about anything. And so I actually ended up transferring schools to Danbury High School. And when I got there, like life honestly got a lot better because I was in a 3,000 person, more inner city type school and finally felt like I fit in. But something at that point in my life, all of a sudden I had a lot of friends and I had girls started liking me. And that's where in my life I started being like, man, like I can do whatever the fuck I want. And I just started like being a lot more chaotic. I started, you know, partying and doing drugs and putting myself in situations that were not great at the time. And funny enough, I was still an actor. I was doing like musical theater at the same time. And then I got really into graffiti and was doing that like on the underpasses on the highways, and just like putting myself in situations where finally for some reason I felt like I fit. And I don't know what it's about, but like I craved chaos and just like, yeah, putting myself in situations that were just bad. And I had this sort of, I came from such a normal family that I wanted to be around people that had a lot less than me. And I honestly feel sort of bad saying that because it's like, it seems a little bit just like using people of like, oh, you come from nothing, so I want to spend time with you. And I did a lot of that. I wanted to put myself in situations where like I saw crazy shit, you know? And I told you the other day, I was at a party in high school and I saw my first stabbing, which was a crazy story because the kid who was throwing the party got stabbed outside his own party, and his dad was at the house, and the dad ran up from downstairs with a machete and was like, "Who stabbed my son?" And like I'm standing there like, yeah, nice. Like I like loved that shit. And I put myself in these situations where I was like, man, like life is wild.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is
rambling.
This is when you transferred to the new school.
Correct.
Is okay. And the old school you went to, was that like a private school? Smaller?
No, it was a public school. I just like was a lot more reserved because I didn't have a lot of friends.
Got it.
And I didn't feel like I fit in. And for some reason, when I switched to this school, like all of a sudden I had friends and girls liked me, and it all of a sudden went to my head where I was like this insecure kid with these medical problems, and like I'm getting made fun of, and all of a sudden people liked me, and I was like, hell yeah. Let's fucking go.
Yeah.
And you know, just I was playing in punk bands, and I was coming into the city on the weekends. I saw another stabbing in the city at this punk concert, which also like then the cops showed up to that one and interviewed us, and I was like, dude, I like loved it. And these are all situations which are like, first off, like I don't think I should have been experiencing at 15 years old. And second, like I'm like smiling about it. You know what I mean? Like I was like, life is wild. I will never be a suit.
Yeah.
I said that for a lot of my life. Like I will never be a suit, which fast forward, I've turned into a little bit of a suit, but like a little, not today. But like it put me in situations where like it was just chaos all the time. And I had a really toxic relationship with girlfriends at the time. As far as like my partying, like I just loved it. I always loved to party. I love to party. Fast forward, you know, we know each other because of my compulsive gambling and my gambling addiction. That was always part of my life because my grandfather was a compulsive gambler. If my parents watch this, I don't know if my dad will say that his father was a compulsive gambler, but he was. He was a judge in New York City. My dad was raised Orthodox Jewish. You know, my grandfather came from a family where his father was a bootlegger and had the strollers that had secret compartments underneath. And like when my grandpa was a baby, like there was passing around booze, and my grandpa lived at the horse tracks. My family's in the horse racing business as well. So I was always around that. And I think I was just around gamblers. Like a lot of my family loved casinos, and like other than my grandpa, nobody's a compulsive gambler. But I was like horse racing was on my house all the time. I don't think I related to it, but it's just like was there.
It was what was playing in the background. Like, you know, my dad's dad was a compulsive gambler also.
Yeah.
I didn't know this until much older in my life, probably like maybe 21, 22 years old.
Yeah.
But there was always sports on at the house, you know, and it's like kind of similar to the horse racing. And yeah, I mean, compulsive gambling is fucking, you're not in sobriety as far as drinking and drug use, but you know, I sometimes think that my compulsive gambling is worse than drinking and drugging. It's different. They're both really horrible addictions. Yeah. But yeah, you can I'd love to hear more about your grandpa.
I mean, listen, I didn't know him when he had a successful like business life. You know, like when I think about him, I think about like he lived in Washington Square Park, like in Washington. He lived right near Washington Square Park. He was a judge. He was a chain smoker, gin and tonic drinker, like very routine with how his life was, very stern. And like taught me and all my friends when I was in college, like how to handicap horse racing. And I was like really proud of it. You know, if you want to talk about gambling life, like just talk about it now. Like I was so open about my like love of gambling to everybody. And I think in some ways, you know, bringing all my college friends to my grandpa's apartment to be like, let's sit around the kitchen table and he's going to teach us how to handicap horse racing, like made me feel really cool. So go back a little, like I moved to New York City at 18 years old to go to NYU to be an actor. I get to NYU, I like sort of made my dream come true because all I wanted to do was be an artist. And I get here and then all of a sudden I'm like riddled with anxiety again because I'm around all these people that are super talented. Everybody seems really cool. My insecurity is like through the roof. And my entire time in college was hard just because like on paper, like I got into shows, I was doing the thing, but like very toxic relationships with girls, the same sort of fuck it mentality. Like I had a lot of really cool opportunities at a young age for like leads in movies, you know, and like getting to the final round in things where I'm like, if I told you those movies, you'd be like, oh, whoa. But like, I didn't give a fuck. So I didn't try at anything. I just like assumed things would always work out in my life. And I think that that's sort of like the summary of how I lived a lot of my life.
Give me one of those movies that I would know.
Inside Llewyn Davis, the Coen brothers movie that Adam Driver ended up getting. Like I made it to one of the final rounds of that. Final rounds of Broadway shows, like musicals, because I'm a singer. And like, it's hard to look back at that and be like, everything's always going to work out for me. Like a lot of my life, I just think no matter what situation I put myself into, I was like, well, somebody will always save me. I've only thought about that in the last couple of years. Like, I think that I just always assumed that no matter how low it went, like someone's got it for me. Like I'm never going to end up on the street. I'm never, you know. So I graduated college. I turned 21. Like again, gambling was always in my life. I even remember now that like at 18 when I could buy scratch off tickets that I was like at the gas station in Danbury where my friend worked and would like use all my money to buy scratch offs. Like I really didn't think about that till recently. Or I learned how to play CeeLo, the dice game.
CeeLo.
And like my buddy would come to my like driveway and I'd have like $8 and I'd be like, let's go CeeLo, like let's play. And so I think about that, but I turned 21 and I actually, when I graduated, had a full acting career. Like I started booking commercials and Burger King and Verizon and Holiday Inn, and I was making 6 figures as a 22-year-old. And like, I don't think that was the best thing to happen for my mentality, because that was another sort of like, fuck it, life's like, I could do anything I want. And I became very flashy and taking people on trips and the most expensive dinners. And like, I have memories of being in the East Village and like standing on top of bars, being like, everything is on me, you know, like the deep insecurity of like how I lived my life for a long time, all covered up with just trying to be a big shot.
Yeah.
And I, you know, started going to Vegas and I started like getting into it, and it clicked. Something clicked where all of a sudden I like felt great. I felt great by it. And the want to be seen by everyone around me like finally clicked in, where I was just like, they love me here.
Yeah.
And that was like sort of the beginning of the journey of then 10 years of just honestly like a blur of putting myself into a wild situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I try to explain to people.
If I'm rambling, I'm sorry.
No, you're not. You're not. I try to explain to people the idea of like, I don't remember so many things the past 10 years of my life because of my addictions. And they're like, how can you not remember those things? And I'm like, because when we're wrapped up in it, bro, it's like, if we're not doing it, if we're not like gambling in that moment, we are thinking about gambling, or we're thinking about when we can go back to Vegas, or when the next game on TV is so that I can lay action on. And
everything else becomes a blur. It's funny that like I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, well, I remember CBGB's, which was like the most famous like punk rock club in Manhattan. Like that's where I saw stabbing when I was in high school. And it was a wild, wild story, but it's like those extreme situations, of course I remember. But what's sad to me is like, there's a huge span of time where not only did I miss out on trips with my friends because there was always an excuse of I missed out on everything, but I've been best man at multiple weddings in the last year, and I think I killed it. But like as far as my speeches go, however, when sitting and actually trying to like think about memories, it was startling how much is gone.
Yeah,
and I think it's like the little things. And I really started being like, man, do I have like a serious like memory issue? Like, why don't I remember anything? But like you said, when you're all consumed by something else, it's like, how are you going to remember? You know what I mean?
I was trying to explain to somebody that my biggest regret is not doing drugs or drinking or gambling or anything like that. My biggest regret is the time that I lost by doing that. And what I gambled, drank, and drugged from my basically 19 until 28.
Yeah.
And then I started gambling again from like 29 to 30. And I lost so much time, bro. I lost so many opportunities to do things and like businesses that I had that were right on the point of like becoming like a startup and like a transactional thing to like, I could have crossed that barrier into making it an actual business and something that like I built, but I could never get over that line and anything because the chaos, the destruction, and like the lies and the chaos from all of the drugs, alcohol, gambling, blah, 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 blah. It would all come to a head. Yeah. And everything would be burnt down again. And so I was just like in this perpetual state of like, build my life up for a year or two, burn it down, build it back up for a year or two, burn it down. And
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm like, I have so many memories going through my head, but I was in a long relationship in my early 20s. And again, I feel like a lot of this is, and I hope people can relate to just like living your life with so much like self-doubt and self-deprecating behavior and anxiety, but covering it up with like wanting to be seen and heard and like felt. Like that's really, I think, like the summary of like so much of my life. But in my early 20s, I ended up in my first like successful relationship with somebody that was not an artist. They had a good family. And I was like in my early 20s, I was an actor. I like lived my life in chaos. And this was somebody that I actually think at the time was like ready to like truly be in a serious relationship. And, you know, I was crazy. Like I was the type of like jealous boyfriend, even in high school, to like slam the brakes on my car and be like, get out, walk, you know, and like make the person walk.
Yeah.
Like really just, I'm not even sure where that comes from, to be honest. Like I wasn't raised like that. It's just like the need for drama. Like I used to have ex-girlfriends be like, you live your life like as if you're in a movie. Like you want your life to be a movie. Like you're not okay with things just being all right. Like you need extreme. You need to like cause a fight. And then it's like, what are you even talking about?
And that needs to be really good or really bad.
Yeah, exactly. But this girl, when we broke up, she said, we were at a music festival. And she said, if I truly thought that you were going to put in the work to be like who I really think you could be, like I would marry you, but you will never. And from that day on is when the compulsive gambling started. I'm not going to blame it on that. I don't think that that's the reason. I think it was a catalyst for sort of extreme behavior, but I got broken up with while I was in, and I'm, if she sees this, I'm sorry. But I was doing a play in New Haven, which was 40 minutes from Mohegan Sun. And it got broken up with. And like when friends would come see me in the play, like I was like, we're in New Haven, Connecticut. Like we could hang out here and like drink and party, but we could also like get a zip car and go to Mohegan Sun. So I started doing that. And like, you probably know this, like the timing was perfect where I just got like destroyed. I was doing this very serious play that was so heavy. I was alone in the winter in New Haven, Connecticut. And the first time I went to a casino, I won like a tremendous amount of money.
Worst thing ever.
Worst thing ever. And then I started going during that time of my life, which is a really long time ago now. It's like over 10 years ago, 11 years ago. I started going like every week. And I got very lucky in the very beginning. And then what's funny is I came back from that and I had like a period of time where I wasn't making any money as an actor. And I started getting the perks of going to these casinos and then sending limos and free stuff and free food and flight to Vegas and flight to Atlantic City. And I was like, it gave me that sort of feeling as if like I made it as an actor. And it was like the worst thing that could ever happen to me because I also just had a girl be like, you. And it's funny because I understand where she was coming from. She was like, I believe in you and you're not going to put the work in. But instead, I sort of took it opposite. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And it was another time in my life where I was like, honestly, then fuck it. Like, let's go. You know?
I, like for the first time I ever gambled, I was a freshman in high school. I was in the Bahamas and I used my fake ID and I took $200 of my Christmas money.
Yeah.
And I went and played blackjack at the Atlantis. And I'll never forget.
Shout out to the Atlantis with the slide that goes straight down.
That slide fucking slid me right into the shark tank, bro. But I was in the tank. There was no barriers.
Yeah, there you go.
And bro, I literally had no idea. I was asking the dealer. I had whatever, 16. I'm like, do I hit or stay? I had no idea how to play blackjack.
Yeah.
$200 turned to $9,000. I come back home. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. My sister and I are sharing a room. I fucking switch the lights on. I'm like, Jenna, wake up. She wakes up. I throw all the cash in the air. I'm like, yeah. If I had lost that $200 that night, I don't know. I can't say for sure. I don't think I would have been a compulsive gambler. I really don't. But it's like the first time you smoke pot. They call it chasing the dragon after that. It's like, you know. For everything that's like bad for you. Until you realize it took me, you know, I knew compulsive gambling was self-destructive probably 8 years ago, to be honest. But you live the gambler's fallacy that you're going to build your empire and you're going to
100%
buy the mansion, buy the Ferraris, get the yachts, and you're going to have this successful business. And you run into money problems because you're gambling. You're like, oh, I don't have a gambling problem. I have a money problem. If I just make more money, then I'll be fine. But it's like I made more money and then my bets would get bigger and the holes would get bigger. The jams would get bigger.
I really just like relied on that for my excitement, you know, like early 20s, full-time actor, booking commercials, part of a theater company, playing in a band. I play guitar. I've played guitar since I was 5 or 6 years old. We toured up and down the East Coast. We released multiple albums. It's interesting to look at that and be like, I wasn't gambling at that time. Yeah, maybe I was a little bit, but it had not formed into like a serious thing. And then once it flipped, all that went away. And life became just about chasing money, and money. Like I look back now and I'm like, I remember all these memories of my mom being like, you're so obsessed with money. All you do is talk about what your friends make or their families, or like everything was about money. And to be honest, like my childhood was tough. I mean, my dad is really successful, and my dad, like I love him and we have a great relationship, but he was a type of guy that was like Steinmetz is never fail.
Yeah.
You know, and like you just can't fail. And I'm very grateful because like they let me go to school to be an actor. You know, they didn't force me to have a backup career. And I think they were really proud of me when I made that dream come true. But, you know, the obsession with money also just sort of like took over. It took over on a whole nother level. And once the music was gone and the arts were gone and the relationships were gone, because after that girl broke up with me, I also like couldn't be in a successful relationship. My like way I dealt with women was also all sorts of nutty as far as just like how I treated people. And in 2015 or 16, I had already had, you know, it's like, it's what you were talking about like chasing this dream. Like I remember going with friends to Las Vegas and being like, man, you should apply for a marker. You need to get the credit. And like, I knew I couldn't, but I was like, you should do it. Fast forward, I'm the one that did it. You know, it's like all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, like I have the credit line. And in 2015, this is when things like I had just gone through that breakup, 2015, 2016. And that was really when things started to get sort of just dark. Like I was sort of on the outs for my acting career. I was working a sales job, but I was working a sales job truly out of just obsession with money. And I drove to Mohegan Sun alone, which I used to do a lot at that point in my life, which like is so disturbing. You know, it's like even thinking about like these solo trips or just, depressing. I'm sure you can relate. Like,
yes.
The solo trips are the worst. And like 12 hours pass and you're like, where am I? Like what's going on? Drove there, took the credit line out completely, lost the entire thing, got in the car, was like, I'm going to drive to my parents' house and see if there's cash anywhere. There was no cash. I don't even know where I was even going to look. Like I just literally got there. I was like, I was going to open the drawers. Nothing there, which is a 2-hour drive, 2.5-hour drive. And this is like sober from anything else. Then I'm like, I'm going to take this zip car because I didn't own a car because I couldn't afford to have a car. So I would rent, which also is like $8 to $10 grand a year. So I could have owned a car. And I drove from there to Atlantic City from Connecticut, which is like another 3 hours, had a credit line there. Took that out, went into their credit office and was like, oh man, so like they would give increases if you would lose. And I like learned how to manipulate that system of like, yeah, it was a tough day here, like increase it. Lost that, took out every dollar to my name, lost that, and then got in the car. So cloudy. And I don't miss that feeling at all. And I got on the highway and I was like, I'm going to kill myself. Like, I'm going to swerve off the road.
Yeah.
Like I'm done. Call my sister, who I love very much, but like we have a really tough relationship. And I think major respect for her because my sister had a lot of, she dealt with a lot of depression as a kid, but like she didn't cover it up. Like in reality, when I really think about it today, like my sister and I honestly think we're like pretty similar.
Yeah.
But I covered it up with just like trying to be like loud and funny and chaotic.
Yeah.
And I called her. First off, like we don't have a great relationship at the time. And like, I was the brother also, like, especially in my early 20s where my mom would call me and be like, what are you doing like to our family?
Yeah.
You know, and called her. She like convinces me to like keep driving and like meet my best friend. I met my best friend, called my family the next morning and got bailed out, you know, and like it's a long time ago. And that was probably the worst thing that ever could have happened was the bailout, but I don't blame anyone. Like who's to know? And stopped for like 2 or 3 months and then back to it.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward and it just like, you know, it just gets worse and worse.
It just gets worse. Yeah. It's funny. My sister and I are also very similar. My sister has, you know, like depression and stuff. And, like your sister, like, I don't think they could hide it. You know, it's like there was no hiding it. Whereas our feelings of depression, anxiety, whatever we were going through, and inadequacy we hid through our gambling. You know what I mean? And like we acted out through the gambling to make ourselves feel better in this very sick, twisted way. And, you know, I know you have a couple of years in recovery from gambling.
Yeah.
I only have, 6 months, but for me, the 6 months, it's like I'm sitting here and I'm like, holy shit. Like, I can't believe I lived like that for so long and thought it was normal. You know what I'm saying? Like the normalcy that you think of what's going on around you when you're compulsively gambling and the rationalizations your mind can make to yourself is insane to then get to a point where you're like away from it for so long and you're like, wow, bro, that's not fucking normal. That's really scary that you did that.
I don't know if you relate, but my memories from like 10 years ago are standing like in a high limit room. Cause again, I was off. That's a whole other thing is like, friends would go bachelor parties, whatever. And I was like, so people loved my stories because I was an actor. I'm like a storyteller. And so people loved my stories. They loved me talking about like the old man next to me who I bonded with for 6 hours and told me his whole life story and was like, let's go hang out in my hotel room. Or they liked like, I started writing a TV script about my like time at these places because I really thought it was like, this is fucking awesome. Like they support the local community and like, yeah, they do. People have jobs here, but like to me, I was like, this is awesome. But like I was the one also that would force like a friend to sit next to me for 8 hours and be like, you bring me so much good luck as they lose everything.
Yeah.
Or would turn around and be like, get the fuck away from me, you cooler, or like, and like, I'm sure people were talking about it, like I was so bad when it comes to like being at these places and my behavior and how I would treat people. And, I'm sure you relate because then all of a sudden it gets to the point where you fast forward many years where it's like, borrow money from this person, convince this person, manipulate this person, basically fully leave my dream life and career to go to a new career, which now I'm very proud of. But at the time were decisions that were made solely about money. But it's like, I had so many moments of standing back to the high limit room. Like I also like wouldn't play anywhere normal. I was like, those people don't fucking know how to do it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
They don't get it.
They're not ruining their lives. They don't get it.
I was like, they don't get it. But going into the bathroom in these high limit rooms and like staring at myself in the mirror and like really trippy, like looking at yourself being like, this is bad.
Yeah.
And I would only think about it in those moments. And when I was like in the shower, I would have like a little voice in my head being like, man, this is bad. Yeah. Like I would wake up with ex-girlfriends and be like, I have business meetings all day and then go rent a zip car is the common thread in all this and drive 3 hours and be like, okay, I have 4 hours the rest of the workday to like do what I can. And I would take business meetings and work calls for the company I worked for at the time from like the lunch, the restaurants in there and see what I could do. Generally, I would lose every dollar to my name and then get back in the car and drive home and like get back and be like, with the girlfriend, like fantastic day at work. Like, that went on and on and on and on for years. And when life got really bad was when everything went online because I didn't have to drive 3 hours anymore. And when all these crypto-based casinos went online, which like everybody knows about, like there's so many YouTubers and Twitch streamers and Kick streamers and like, of course I'm not going to name any of them by names, but like they literally just streamed themselves gambling. And I loved it for some reason. Love the YouTube videos.
Bro, those guys, like they're guys who are like, oh, sponsored by Stake or whatever crypto casino.
Yep.
And they're like gambling. They have like 500 grand in their wallet. First of all, the 500 grand is given to them for free to gamble on a stream. And then whatever they make over the 500 grand, they get like 2% of. It's nothing.
And they have young kids watching.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even young, but I still fucking loved it. I was like, I'll sit here for 3 hours and watch someone like play fake roulette.
Did you ever play like on stake or anything? Or
Yeah, so that's the fast forward. I found out about these places and started doing only that because I was like, I don't have to drive anywhere anymore. I don't have to fly anywhere. Like, I have no need to go to Vegas. I have no need to do anything. I'm only going to play on stake. And I think that period of my life is when things were the most extreme, because anyone that does it in sports, like, that's normal. Or you make like old school, make a phone call to a bookie or like log into a website. But for me, all of a sudden, and it changed because all of a sudden it was like, oh, I need crypto. So that was like, what do I do to get crypto? And then that became my obsession, you know, like being on vacation with a girlfriend and turning the other corner to do that. And like the limits on those websites are extreme. So it took everything to another level. And by the end of that journey in my life, we're talking.
What do you mean by limits? Like what do you mean?
Like I'm playing on a hand of blackjack.
Oh, like you can put like whatever you want on it.
50 grand a hand.
Wow.
You can play. Sometimes more. And like you see somebody like a famous celebrity online playing, streaming, and you see it and you don't think that's real, but it is real, you know?
Wow.
And like you can do crazy things that you would never be able to do that in Las Vegas without probably proof of having a tremendous amount of money in the bank. But what do these like offshore crypto-based casinos care? And so we get to the point where like my life became about like commission sales, fuck acting, fuck music, fuck everything that like made me happy.
Yeah.
And it's like more. And I got to that extreme. I got to the most extremes. I made it to the highest level of these like tiers of these. And you're talking about sitting in an apartment in New York City for hours and hours at a time, staring at a computer, playing a game called pachinko, which is where a ball goes down a bunch of things and you select where it's going to go. And it's like, what is happening? You know, like even if I rewind, like my grandfather, the horse racing grandfather, loved casinos and he was a craps player and he taught me how to play craps.
Great.
And yeah, in the moment that was fun. And I was going to a casino and I was doing that. By the end, I'm literally like pushing a button, watching someone in a random Eastern European country spin a wheel to play a crazy game where there's like animations behind it and people are like this. And I won't say the number, but you know, I ended up winning 7 figures of money.
Oh my God.
Over the course of 2 or 3 days. And lost all that in 24 hours.
Mike.
And
you didn't take anything out?
No.
Oh, brother.
And I think that's like probably what anyone that struggles, I think, for like more and more and more is like, at what point are you just doing things like, at some point in my life, it went from just like needing the affirmation and the not ever wanting to be a suit and wanting to be loved and be the loudest one in the room to just this blur of like, what is even happening?
Yeah.
You know, I was convinced when that happened that like, I'm going to triple this and then I'm going to triple this. And it's like, what are you doing?
And there was a point in time probably where you were like, if I ever get to, you know, $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, like you're done cashing out.
But you won't be. You won't.
And then you get to that point and
it doesn't
then
matter anymore.
Oh, I'm at $1 million. You know what? We're going to get this to 10.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really crazy to think about that. It put me in like a state of paranoia. You know, I think that living my life in like such extremes for such a long period of time, and I don't know if you feel the same way, I really think like screwed up how my just brain works in general. My like
Definitely.
What I need for excitement.
Definitely.
You know,
Definitely,
because
bro.
even in those moments of my life, which was years ago, it didn't feel like anything. And I left my apartment that day before I lost, knowing that I could like turn a VPN on and go on my computer and the money would be there. And I went and had like pizza with my buddy. and tried to pretend, and I didn't tell him. And I was just like sitting there opposite him, like staring at him, like looking around. I was like, they're watching me. You know, like I got into all of a sudden a crazy state of paranoia. And dude, like why would you want to live your life like that? You know?
It's funny you say that because it's like, I feel that gambling, I either was living in the zeros or I was living in the tens, and there was never living in the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7s. And I think that's what you were just saying, like the distortion of reality, because even for me, it was like, if something good happened in life, it was never as good as like winning $100,000 at a table. Or if something bad happened in life, it was never as bad as losing $100,000 in one hand of blackjack. You know what I mean? So like those feelings, those dopamine rushes were like, it distorted life. It distorted like good things happening around you. It distorted like sad things that like happen around you in life, like loss of a friend, loss of a pet, or loss of a family member or whatever. And
I couldn't handle any of the like living in the 2s and 9s, and living in the low and the high, like is also part of life.
Yeah.
You know, like bad things happen and also really good things happen. And I seem to like never be able to handle the in-between or that extreme version. Like everything was just distorted. You know, my grandfather, at the end of his life, I was taking care of him. First off, I forced my family to pay me to take care of him, which I hate that now. You know, like literally, I live in Williamsburg at the time, and he lives in Greenwich Village, and I like am requiring them to pay me weekly to go take care of my grandfather. And then he passed away because of his gambling. He had nothing left. This is a guy that owned a plane at one point, or like a little mini plane, but like he had a lot when my dad was younger, had nothing left. He had his life insurance policy, which I think was pretty small. And because I had taken care of him at the end of his life, I was like, you got to pay me for that too, out of his life insurance, you know? And like, instead of just like grieving the fact that my grandfather passed away, who was like an amazing person, and experiencing him from being able to take him to his doctor's appointments. And like, this guy was wild. Like he was a crazy guy.
Yeah.
And like, that's special. But like, I didn't even,
it was blurred.
It was blurred. And I was like, where's the money?
Yeah, dude,
where's the money for something that's like people should experience? Like that's part of people's lives. And I think that's so much of everything in my life was either like wanting to experience it in a different way than I was experiencing it, or I just couldn't handle it. Like in fall of 2019, I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is a whole nother thing on top of my lifelong medical problems, which were like pretty surface level as far as just like I had a really bad stomach and all that kind of stuff. And I got made fun of a lot for it as a kid, but I was a really bad hypochondriac. And again, all of this is covered up with just like chaos and like, let's party type of personality. And then in fall of 2019, my entire left leg goes numb, and I'm in New Orleans, and I'm walking around with my buddy, and I'm like in the casino with my buddy, and I can't feel my leg. And like, you know, my buddy Lee, I remember we were in the Harrah's casino there, and my buddy leaves to go to sleep, and I stay there all night, and I like stumbled and dropped chips everywhere. And like, that was like a pretty typical story at that time of my life, was like dropping chips and cash, and like couldn't feel my leg. And I get back, and over the course of 2 months, I get diagnosed with MS, which is like, you know, a semi-rare autoimmune disease. And some people, when they would get diagnosed with something like that, like, yeah, you're going to grieve for a little bit, but you're also going to be like, okay, here's what I got to do. I take this medicine, I start working out, I start eating better. And it was another instance in my life similar to the girlfriend story, when the girlfriend was like, well, you're not ever going to be anything anyway, where I was like, see guys, I'm sick.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, I'm just a fucked up dude with problems. I'm going to keep pretending like I have my life together, but now I'm sick. Yeah. And I don't think I thought I was going to die, but like nobody wants to get diagnosed with a lifelong autoimmune disease. And that was another instance where at that time of my life, I basically was just like, all right, let's go extreme.
Yeah.
You know?
Do it's,
and then things got better.
I want to talk. I do want to talk about that. But, for me, like gambling all the time, like I remember last summer, my son's like, 6 months old and I'm compulsively gambling and I'm like, I need to stop. How am I going to pay for school? How am I going to pay for this
diapers?
And I'm like, like we need, my fiance's like, oh, we need diapers. I'm like, sure, I'll buy it. It's like Thursday. I'm like, I'll buy them Monday. Like, cause I knew diapers, Monday I had money coming in. She's like, we have no diapers. Like I need them now. So like, now I'm like, oh, text my friend, sell me $200. I'll pay you back Monday. And it's like just the insanity. But I remember one night I'm driving and I'm down 6 figures on the day. And I'm like driving and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I need to stop. I knew the end was getting close and I wanted to stop for my family. I wanted to stop for my kid. And I remember I hit a pothole and I got a flat tire and I pulled over on the side of the road. And listen, everyone gets flat tires. It sucks. Everyone's like, oh, fuck, I got a flat tire. You got to get your car towed. You got to replace the tire. I had to get my car towed. And I remember just like being so distraught. And I remember in my head, I said to myself, I'm like, this is a way bigger deal that you are unable to manage right now because of your compulsive gambling addiction. Yeah. And your life is utterly 100% unmanageable. And it's all due to your gambling right now. Because at this point I was, a year and change sober. So, it's crazy what gambling can do. And the difference between gambling and drugs is that I can gamble and you'd have no idea. It's not like if I'm snorting oxys, you're going to look at me and be like, bro, you look fucking strung out. You're sleeping. You're nodding off. Like what's going on? Yeah. Or you physically look like shit. But with gambling, it's like, I could be sitting here right now talking to you.
You have no idea.
And you have no idea. And I think it's so insidious and it's, it's now so publicized and advertised and you got LeBron James and Kevin Hart advertising, oh, join DraftKings, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's like, bro, we're selling crack to crackheads now, or you're enabling people to start gambling and they get that taste. They win the first time. They think they can do this over and over again. Then they start losing and then they dip into the savings and they dip into the wife's savings and they dip into the kids' college funds. And what we're about to witness, I'm not wishing this, but I just don't think it's not possible for us to sit here and say that there's not going to be a gambling epidemic
100%
in the near future. But
100% there will be. Yeah.
I want to talk about this because you are an inspiration and you're someone I really look up to and admire.
Thank you. How to get better?
Because you are recovered.
Correct.
And I say recovered as in you are in recovery. Yeah. You have not gambled now for multiple years.
Correct.
You're married, you live a life of integrity, you have successful businesses that, you are entrusted with people's credit card information and, for people out there to understand that you can go from where you were to what you are. It's not like you just stop gambling and everything gets better. There was a lot of work that was done in between. I'd love for you to fill us in.
I mean, it took things getting really rough to get brutally honest. I mean, I think that I'm somebody that I felt like I was hyper aware of who I was, but I think that looking back, I'm like, I had no idea who I was. I had to be willing to, and I threw up my hands because things got really, really rough and I was about to propose and I didn't have money for a ring and like a typical story that probably a lot of people had. But when I finally did throw up my hands and was like, I'm finally willing to say this out loud, even though everybody knew of me in this way, but I finally was just like, you know what? Like, I'm done. Just doing that in the beginning for real and believing in it was at least a start to like take me to where I am now. Like I had to be willing to throw like you just said, like you pulled over to the side of the road and you're like, I can't even manage this. It was the same thing for me. It's like, why do I want to live my life anymore with manipulating and lying and having no relationship with my family and getting to the point where I'm going to lose my friends. And honestly, like we all know what happens if that kind of stuff. I'm very grateful that I didn't put myself in a position where I was like going to go to prison or, and people have. That's not me. But I threw my hands up. I was willing to commit to putting myself in a better position and also willing to admit that like I don't know everything and life is hard and complicated. And I started committing myself to be like, I do believe that life can be better and getting to the point that you like who you are. Like you go to the beginning of the story and so much of my life is revolved around self-deprecating sadness of just like not, and it's nobody's fault. Like my parents are great, but like for some reason I just like never believed in who I was. And I don't even think I'm fully there yet. I think that that's like a lifelong journey to truly like who you are, but being willing to start that process and commit to having my life be better and be a better partner and a better friend and a better son and hopefully a father someday and somebody that like has an honest business and works hard. Just being willing to like start trying honestly has put me in a path that now multiple years later, like life is 50 times better than I thought it could have been. And like we were talking about before, obviously there's going to be hardships and there's going to be crazy excitement, but I try really hard now to not overthink it. I try really hard to not have my life be about money as much. I am running companies and that's cool. They make money, but putting myself in a position where it's not obsession over material things. 10 years ago, if I took money out of an ATM, I always covered the screen, even if I was with friends, and they'd laugh and be like, that's your weird thing you do. And it wasn't always because there was no money in there. I just like couldn't look. My relationship with it was so screwed. And now it's like, if I get a ticket, I pay my ticket. If I like have to pay a bill, I pay a bill. Like just being okay with the fact that I don't need to live my life in like pure chaos. Like I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. It's okay for things to be normal. And it's sometimes still hard to wrap my head around that. I think it's like a daily thing that I have to work on. But, I got married a year ago. Like I'm forming a solid like foundation with my wife. I never had a successful relationship. We're going to at some point start to try have a kid. Like that's super amazing to think that the kid will hopefully get the best version of me.
Yeah.
I'm growing 2 companies with a staff across the country and they rely on me. That's a crazy thing to think about, but I'm so proud of being able to support other people, which is normal.
Yeah.
And just like you and we're young. And we deserve for our life to be amazing and we deserve to like laugh and be happy and also cry like when things are tough and not escape that with something that's just going to put ourselves into a blur for a multiple year.
Yeah. I think it's important. Like we aren't defined by what we have done to ourselves or what has happened to us or, in your instance, like you getting, multiple sclerosis or like there's a lot of instances that you could have just continued to self-destruct. And I think most importantly, like there are people that have come down to Alcoholics Anonymous or Gamblers Anonymous and like get sober in their 50s, 60s and 70s and
Correct.
Like live the last like, half or last quarter of their life and have this beautiful, amazing life that they never thought that they could have. And we're all human beings. And I think it's like really important that it's so easy to get lost in the sauce and keeping up with the Joneses, bro. Like social media, like you go on social media and you're like, you see this guy, he's got a Lamborghini, he's got the watches in the house, and you're like, oh, what the fuck? What am I doing wrong? Blah, blah. And you're like, okay, you come to find out that guy is like, it's a rental. He's stealing people's money or whatever the case. I'm judging right now.
I know
but,
exactly what you're saying.
But like,
I used to be obsessed with that.
Yeah. And it's like really important that like life's a journey. Everyone's journey looks different. Everyone comes from different creeds, different backgrounds, different upbringings, but the one thing that you and I have in common is that we both suffer from the same disease, and the disease is gambling, but really the disease is like, we don't love ourselves enough. We don't think we're worth enough. We don't value our upbringing or value our morals. And we decided to go off the deep end and gamble our lives away. And I think you're a perfect example of like, okay, I did that. And I learned a really valuable lesson. And like, now I'm on the other side of things where like, I'm taking good care of myself. I'm taking good care of my wife. I take good care of my employees.
Yeah.
And like,
yeah. And it's, I hope people can relate to like, I'm not a celebrity. I'm not, in a lot of ways, like I'm like a normal guy. Yeah. I come from like a well-off family, but I'm a normal guy. And I think that that's an important thing to talk about, because like most people that go through these things are like traditional standard people, middle of nowhere, Iowa.
yeah.
And it is okay to ask for help. It's okay to throw your hands up. It is also okay to be different. You know, like I wasn't okay with that for a long time. I live my life in a different way than other people, and that is okay, you know? And yeah, I'm extremely grateful for where my life is. I'm extremely like excited about the journey ahead, and not comparing to other people. And like we all live like that. Like I remember sitting at the casino tables and seeing someone with $250,000 next to me. Probably that person is down $8 million for the year, but like I in my head was like, that's how I want to be. When I was on commercials, they used to play in the casinos on the TVs, and I'd be like, that's me, as I was sitting there. And I was like, that's how I, like, look at me. But none of that is important. You know, like we have one life to live. Hopefully it's a long one, and hopefully we can like have great families and be good partners and be successful. And some people are going to be more successful than others. And I'm done with like wanting to compare to what other people have. Like I'm going to do the best that I can and enjoy my life and surround myself. This is a nice summary. Surround myself with like people like you that are trying to better themselves.
Oh, thank you, Mikey.
And I feel grateful. I think that you and I are people that should be grateful that we even have the ability to look at ourselves and be like, I want to be a better version of myself.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I want to say is like, everybody says people don't change, you know, like it's like a very typical thing to say. People
Go
don't
off,
change.
Mikey. Go off right now. I see it coming.
But people can change, and watching people change, and I've seen it firsthand, is so special. That's even cooler than myself changing. Like seeing people go from a certain point in their life to where they are. And that doesn't need to be someone with some sort of addiction. It could be somebody that went through crazy hardships and loss and whatever.
Yeah.
But like people can change if they're willing to try and ask for help. And I think that that's an amazing thing that people can. Anyone says that they can't is wrong. Watching people change is like one of the best things that I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm just grateful to be in a position that I'm scratching the surface of becoming the person that I know that I always could be as a normal guy.
Well, I definitely have noticed change in you. And I was so excited when we were talking about you coming on. You were willing to. And I hope anyone that watched today, I mean, listen, you can help so many people, and you're kind of like, you know, we've discussed this, you're kind of undercover with this stuff. And I am not as undercover. I kind of like scream it from the mountaintops. And
you have you've had a different journey. You've had a different journey, and I do too, but not the same way.
But I will say this, somebody like you can help a lot of other people because you can smell it. You can fish it out when someone's really struggling internally, and you have that ability to be like, hey, like, what's going on? What's up? And really talk to them like the way we talk today. You can help anyone.
It's normal. It's okay. Yeah. Everybody goes through stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel for the people and anyone that watches this that is like struggling with secret things that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, it's that's a really tough place to be in. You and I both understand that, but everybody deserves happiness,
Yes, they do.
you know? So I hope it does help people.
Thanks for coming on,
That's
bro.
all I got. Thank you, brother. I
Thank
love
you, bro. I
and
love you too.
very proud of you for this and what you're building and
Thank
doing.
you.
And I think you're going to help a lot of people. So
Thank you, bro.
Proud of you.
I appreciate it.